Hi, welcome to Android Dialogues, where we have bite-sized conversations with people in the Android community. I'm Huyen and I'm speaking with
Audrey Troutt.
And we're currently in Philadelphia for Philly ETE. Audrey, where are you based and how did you get started in Android?
So I'm based here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I got started with Android right here, actually, just down the street in a little startup called Artisan Mobile, and we did mobile marketing automation, so analytics, A/B testing, push messaging, and things like that. And we had mobile SDKs that app developers could drop into their apps to take advantage of the services that we provided. Mm-hmm. And previous to that, I'd worked in mobile web and on like years of Java backend development, but Android was really easy to get into. Java is my first language, and I found it really fun building an SDK, like working in libraries. I like solving problems. I like building tools for people, and I find it particularly interesting to craft a really intuitive API and great documentation and completely robust code that never crashes, I swear.
All the things that developers dream of, and you help make it happen. So I had the pleasure of meeting Audrey like 2 years ago at Droidcon, New York, where she gave a really awesome talk on metaprogramming, which I think is up somewhere on the internet. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'll link in the show notes. But we were talking, and Audrey, actually, you've kind of made a little bit of I guess, kind of progression from being an engineer to being a manager. As you kind of progress in your career, sometimes you kind of get to a point where maybe like you're thinking about whether you want to transition to being a manager or if you want to be an individual contributor. It's a term I learned this week, so I'm using it in the interview. So Audrey, I wanted to ask you about kind of maybe your first steps to being a manager and maybe like, I guess, how your work as an engineer has been kind of influencing your work as a manager.
Yeah, definitely. I really started out moving toward management in getting into more of like a tech leadership and eventually project management sort of role. It always comes up in building software. Like we need somebody to help keep us organized, make sure we're pointed in the right direction, clean up Jira tickets. And like I said, I really enjoy communicating and getting things organized, and that comes into play in my interest in building libraries and really useful tools for people. But I also enjoy doing that for my team, and it was something I naturally gravitated towards. So even early on in my career, I found myself in initially tech leadership roles and some more project management, lots of project management training. And eventually I ended up in a management role where I was actually supervising other developers. And I've gone back and forth actually a couple times between being an individual contributor, IC, if you will, over to a more management role where, like today I spend a very small percentage of my time actually writing code and contributing to our product, and more what my responsibility is creating a space in which my team, my developers can be successful, to point them all in the right direction, move the obstacles out of their way, and let them do their magic.
Like I feel like some of my favorite managers have been managers that actually started out as engineers and have understood what it's like from this side.
Yeah.
Having sometimes like wanting to get things done, like understanding like how to communicate like requirements or like kind of business side like expectations and design side expectations to engineers. And I think especially in mobile, like we kind of come to like a common situation where we are working with multi-platforms, especially mobile, because usually with Android there usually comes an iOS client as well.
Yeah.
And so you think of a manager as someone who has to kind of be the bridge, or at least kind of be able to interpret kind of both sides of things. Is that something that you deal with in your role?
Absolutely. So my current company is Tune. So Tune is the company that acquired that Artisan Mobile where I started out in Android. And so today our SDKs have grown. We have 13 different SDKs and plugins. So beyond native iOS and Android, of course we support Apple TV and we support Windows and we support Unity and Xamarin and Titanium and PhoneGap, and it just
all the things.
The list goes on. And it really helps in this role, like to have the experience of being a cross-platform developer. And we work full stack too and supporting the whole back end as well, but it helps to have the context, understanding what these problems look like to solve, in these different spaces, and what it takes to be able to jump from platform to platforms. You add a new feature on iOS, now you have to add on Android, and now you have to add it, to Unity as well. Now you have to add it to Xamarin, and being able to understand what that takes for an engineer to complete and what gaps you need to look out for, it helps with the understanding. And there are actually studies of engineers and satisfaction, like job satisfaction. They say one of the things is like having a manager who could do your job, it leads to, higher engagement and satisfaction. And I think a big part of that is that understanding that you bring to the table. Like you understand what the developers need to be successful, what you need to set up for them. And because you understand the position that they're in, it's a lot easier to trust them, to kind of get out of their way, let them do their work.
So, I mean, obviously, if you were kind of, say, a full-time engineer doing 2 platforms, you'd have to do a lot of, I assume, like research and kind of having to deal with context switching. How, as a manager, how do you kind of keep up to date enough? Because obviously, like, if you want to, like having to talk to, engineers, we all have, as tech people, we all have to keep up.
Yeah.
And I assume that as a manager too, that's also part of your job. It's not just like kind of shepherding us around and making sure that, like the herd of engineering cats, like stay on track, but that, to be able to communicate with us, you have to keep on top of what we're doing. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, as a technical manager, you're definitely still a leader. I consider myself a tech leader, and the way that I stay on top of it is really similar to what I used to do as a developer, which is I go to conferences. We're here at Philly ETE today. This is part of the reason why I go to conferences, is to get a sense of what are some new topics that I should be paying attention to. A little deeper dive into a particular framework I haven't had a chance to use yet, but now I can see a working example of. And it's a lot of reading blogs, and it's doing work on the side, like hacking around and teaching and just doing fun work in the community. I did that as a developer, and I do that now as a manager. But because there's so much more that I'm responsible for, and I can't possibly stay on top of all of it, you also have to learn how to build that expertise on your team and be able to depend on them to a certain extent to bring that expertise into the team. You have to understand at a certain point, you're not going to be able to provide all of the leadership. You have to hire those people. You have to support and coach and really depend on those people. And you can accomplish a lot more together, and you can cover a lot more ground if you learn how to cultivate that knowledge across your team and not just within yourself.
Well, I think that's really great that what I'm hearing, what you're saying is that, in a sense that it is kind of like a group effort to kind of stay on top of things. And, if you ever thought about management, we're kind of curious, but a little bit leery of letting go of technical skills. You still have to do that.
Yeah.
From what it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are technical managers who still write code. I know CTOs that still code, 50% of the time or more. It's incredibly challenging, but those roles are out there. Leadership roles where you're still very, knee deep in the technical challenges of day to day. That's not what my role looks like today. And it's a little bit of a choice and a necessity in this role. But even when you're not writing code day to day, you're still immersed in it. You're very close to the team. And, I still do code reviews at the very least. And like I mentioned, I'm still doing, I do fun things on the side. As well, to kind of stay fresh and continue challenging myself.
So do you have any tips for anyone that is either thinking about management or maybe has an opportunity to kind of change over from engineering to management?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not a decision to make lightly. I think you have to be aware of all of the many skills that are required for management that aren't part of being a successful engineer. It's like 80% people skills. It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of organization. Sometimes it's note taking in meetings. It's about everything about facilitating the process of getting software built and not actually building it. And which is I don't want to discourage people from going into it, because it also is a wonderful opportunity, because it's almost like multiplying your impact. As an individual contributor, like you can build an awesome feature, but as a great manager, you can create a super team and you can accomplish amazing things, and you really are facilitating that, making it possible. But it's a different sort of payoff, and it costs different kinds of energy to do that people work. Management, especially when you get into like actual, like HR people management, it can be incredibly challenging and even painful at times, to deal with things, things like performance management, that it's part of the job. It's great when everything's going well, but sometimes it's hard. And, if you're not invested in the whole part of being a manager, the whole spectrum, the good, the bad, the grunt work, and the glory, maybe it's not a great fit. And that there are a lot of other options for us as engineers. I mean, there's nothing that says that you have to become a manager. I think a lot of people think that, like, you kind of max out in your career as an engineer, and then if I'm going to move up, like, I need to become a manager. And I don't think that that's true. I know people that spend their whole careers as engineers, and they become great leaders, and they could even mentor, but they never really get into people management, and they have great success, And there are other paths as well where you end up in a leadership role, but not as much managing people. And that's something I see a lot in the startup scene, where you have like a CTO, or a technical co-founder who's very hands-on with the technology and very hands-off, delegating a lot of the people management and the process management to somebody else. So it can look a lot of different ways. And so don't feel like there's only one path to take to go from engineer to manager. Find that combination of work and required skills and things like that work for you.
So that's really awesome, and I kind of like that, the good, the bad, and the grunt work. I feel like that should be a movie, and you're like, woo, do do do.
So I feel like we could do this, right?
We should totally do that. We can shoot it, and then it'll be like the Wild West of like mobile and like tech development and like next up on Android Dialogues. So, but thank you so much, Audrey, and I really appreciate the perspective, and it's really great to have a little bit of direction, because I think sometimes when we get to these kind of decisions, it feels like we're kind of floating in the air. So, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, we are really honored to have you. So, if people wanted to find you on the internet, how can they do that?
Well, the easiest way to reach me is on Twitter. I'm Auditty, Auditty, and I'm always happy to talk about tech and careers and things like that.
Awesome. So if you have any questions for Audrey, definitely find her on the internet. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Audrey, again.
Happy to be here, Wen. Thank you.
And we'll see y'all next time. Bye.